Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading Generation Hope, How Inclusive Economics Can Help Us All Thrive. This is something I'm reading a little bit at a time for my own process of deconstructing all the bad stuff I was taught. And if you're interested in reading along with me, you can get copies here. This is part 3, The Scope of Impact. Chapter 9, Reimagining Community. Buckminster Fuller, the visionary and techno-optimist, famously said that for the first time in history, we have the opportunity to support and accommodate all humanity at a substantially more advanced standard of living than any humans have ever experienced. That was 40 years ago. While the standard of living has improved for some, I have a feeling Fuller wouldn't be so optimistic now. Instead, we're contemplating what economist and former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis calls technofeudalism. Why? Because the hierarchy behind feudalism hasn't changed much since the 15th century. The feudal system was once the dominant social and economic system in medieval Europe. In this system, the nobility held lands from the crown in exchange for military service. Vassals, in turn, acted as tenants of the nobles. Peasants, called villeins or serfs, were obliged to live on their lord's land and give him homage, labor, and a share of the produce in exchange for presumed military protection. Villeins had more rights and social status than those in slavery, but were under a number of legal restrictions that also differentiated them from free men. For instance, villeins could not leave without their lord's permission. Today's nobility has been replaced by billionaires, vassals by white-collar corporate employers, and villeins and serfs by blue-collar workers. And the link between value creation and wealth creation is just as broken. Blue-collar and service industry workers, especially gig workers, get the same raw deal as serfs. They work their butts off just to make ends meet, while those further up enjoy outsized benefits of their efforts. Of course, nobility in the past only became so via inheritance. And although rags to riches stories are few and far between, and most come into that sort of money through their family, you can technically become a billionaire from proverbial nothing today. As mentioned in the previous chapters, Yanis Varoufakis' book, Another Now, presents a radical and subversive answer to techno-feudalism, exploring what a fair and equal society could look like. Imagine it is now 2025, and that years earlier, in the wake of the world financial crisis of 2008, a new post-capitalist society had been born, one which a global high-tech uprising has birthed a post-capitalist world in which work, money, land, digital networks, and politics have been truly democratized. Varoufakis presents his vision in a dramatic and tantalizing glimpse of a brave new world where the principles of democracy, equality, and justice are truly served. Through the eyes of 3 characters, a libertarian ex-banker, a Marxist feminist, and a maverick technologist, we see the genesis of a world without commercial banks or stock markets, where companies are owned equally by all staff, basic income is guaranteed, global imbalances and climate change cancel each other out, and housing is socialized. Contrast this against the poverty trap we have created, where the poorer you are, the more you have to pay, and you can see why it took science fiction for him to offer us his ideals. Varoufakis presents 2 ingredients for this near-future shift. The first is the end of tradable shares, and the second is a version of UBI that is not funded by taxes, universal basic income. Tradable shares allow someone like Rupert Murdoch to buy the shares of any newspaper in the world, which Varoufakis describes as an absurd situation that turns the media into a personal mouthpiece. And he's right. As we saw in an earlier chapter, serious decisions are not made in the US Congress, the UK Houses of Parliament, or German Bundestag, but are instead made among the boards of directors and at annual general meetings of the most powerful companies, such as Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, or Volkswagen. Our world is controlled by corporations via lobbyists. In Another Now, people-friendly banks and markets are established inside of a counter-reality of benign markets, benign banks, and special funds that guarantee the welfare of everybody. The other big change Varoufakis makes a case for is UBI. His argument is strong, but the problem I've always had with UBI is the fact that society does need people to be productive. Under UBI, people who love their jobs would likely still work and earn an additional income. But a lot of menial jobs that need to get done would only get done if they were extremely well paid. I'll give you an example. Let's say everyone gets $1,200 per month. That is roughly what a person makes working full-time, making minimum wage in the US. This is before taxes are taken out, and by the way, still below the federal poverty level. How many jobs that nobody wants to do in the first place bring in that kind of income? For example, no one is cleaning toilets in McDonald's for the joy of it. They do so because they don't have a choice. If they no longer needed the money, why stay? Even if 20% of low-skilled employees quit the workforce, companies would need to pay many times more to attract people to roles no one wants. They'd build that expense into the cost of visiting McDonald's. That kind of inflation never stays in one sector either, so it's feasible to believe that the general cost of living could increase to $1,200 more than before UBI, in effect canceling out any benefit it created. I want to clarify that I don't think UBI is a bad idea. It would certainly facilitate the 5 principles of inclusive economics. But while we explore UBI more broadly, I believe there's a role for both UBS, Universal Basic Services, and universal and targeted cash payments in a progressive welfare system, which I discuss in Chapter 11. When we have robots doing all the jobs people don't want to do, ironically, one of the fears we have about our changing world, UBI can work. In a future where all basics are taken care of by robots, humans will be able to enjoy retirement at a young age and leisure and relaxation without many of the life pressures we live with today. The result of the 2 ingredients creates a third outcome in another now. All the real estate is owned by communities, and everyone rents their homes using their UBI. This levels real estate wealth and removes private rent, as the rent is collected by communities is used for each community. The society represented in another now is not perfect. However, it is decidedly better than our now. If our current trajectory remains unchecked, we have to be careful we don't end up like the movie WALL-E, where rampant consumerism, corporate greed, and environmental neglect have turned planet Earth into a garbage-strewn wasteland where humanity is nowhere to be found. In that world, the planet still has hope, but humans gave up on it 7 centuries earlier, when megacorporation by and large, B&L, evacuated the planet onto giant starliners. Sound familiar? We have a crop of billionaires, Bezos, Branson, and Musk, who all have space ambitions. And remember, cults always promise space travel. They claim to have been fascinated by the idea of space travel ever since their childhood. Now, as business people, they also see tremendous opportunity to make money by exploiting resources in space, perhaps because they can't see any way we can save our planet. If they had their way, less than 0.01% of the world's populations would make it onto their starliners, with no plan for us, the rest of us, and our beautiful planet. I can't accept escape for the few as our only future, especially as someone who thinks the idea of colonizing other planets or solar systems is ridiculous. Humanity has found a way to beat every previous perceived existential threat. Starvation by overpopulation, 2 world wars, the Cuban Missile Crisis, etc. Even though we can't trust our current leadership to take us towards something that is not WALL-E, just like in another now or the many revolutions in the past, humanity will intervene. And I believe the rescue is most likely to come from the younger generations in the form of community. You can get copies of Generation Hope attached here.